Well, welcome everybody to the Move Texas panel on Black Voters Matter. I'm Rich Reddick. I'll be moderating this. I'm a professor at UT Austin and College of Education. And I just want to really quickly go through our co-panelists. We've got Royce Brooks, Executive Director at Annie's List. We've got Chris Hollins, the Harris County Clerk, and Raven Douglas, Political Director at Move Texas. So, folks, first of all, thank you for making the time to be here. This is such an important issue, and I'm really glad that we're all able to come together and discuss this. So the first question I have is a question that is immensely important. I'd love to hear all your perspectives on this. Why is it important that young Black Texans vote in this election? Royce, you want to start us off?
Great. And thank you so much to Move for putting this together. You know, this election is absolutely life and death. We're seeing it right now. The people we have the chance to elect into office can change our lives. They can impact our lives. And young Black voters have as much at stake as anybody, and frankly, a lot more in terms of the changes that we need to see from our leaders. So it is important because it is existential.
Wow. Raven, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Royce said it best, but I think just to reiterate what she said, I think it's super critical for young Black voters to engage in this election because there are so many crucial races up and down the ballot that affect a multitude of different issues that impact our lives. And so whether it is, policing, or whether it's criminal justice reform, or, whether it's climate change and the fact that Hurricane Laura decimated Lake Charles, which is a predominantly Black city, there are a number of different issues and candidates at the local level and that have an impact on these issues. And so as Royce mentioned, November will change our lives. And so it's super critical that everyone shows out to vote, but more importantly, young Black voters, because there's a lot on the line.
Yeah, and I think both Raven, you and Royce made that point about not simply what's on top of the ticket, but all throughout, right? Not just simply, hey, there's one big national election we should be concerned about, but there are so many issues that are impacting folks every day. Clerk Hollins, tell us a bit about your perspective on why this is so important for young Black Texans.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I want to echo the sentiments of my sisters here, that clearly there's just so much more on the line. But I also just want to get down to brass tacks, right? And let's talk about power and how that works, right? We get to 2020, which has been tumultuous and challenging in so many ways. But, the death of Brother George Floyd sparked a movement, the largest civil rights movement in history, where now for the first time, we're seeing people across society, across the board, say that Black lives matter, right? And we've known that, of course, and that's great. And no one can take away the fact that your life matters. But what I've told a couple of people, young people in particular, is that you individually can make sure that you don't count, right? And so let's talk about that, right? Your life matters, but if you don't vote, you don't count. And the politicians that are in office, we can talk about whether they're on our side, whether they're not. We can talk about whether they're intelligent, whether they have good policies or not. But I can guarantee you that all of them can count because they keep their jobs by counting votes. And they serve the people who they think can deliver for them at the ballot box. And so if you're not one of those people, and more importantly, if your entire group is not one of those people, and we know that young people and young people of color are the least likely people to cast their votes, then you're guaranteeing that you don't count. And if you want to change that, if you want the opposite to be true, if you want your leaders to take you seriously, to listen to you, and not to listen to you out of the kindness of their heart, but to listen to you because they have to, then you have to count, period.
That's really well said. And I think you made the point about the accountability piece, right? So uh, people don't have to respond or be concerned if you're not a viable voting block. You're not going to either show up or you're not going to advocate. So we have to make the process complete, not just the advocacy, but also the actual piece where we come to the polls and we say, I keep on saying we as if I'm a young person, youngish, young identifying, but you get what I'm trying to say. So let's talk a little bit about the current context and let's talk about COVID-19. And that's disproportionately impacted the Black communities across the state and the country. In the state of Texas, there's been no attempt to make voting more accessible. You know, Texas is only one of 9 states that has requirements to vote by mail. You just can't simply ask for a mail-in ballot. So what are ways that Harris County and other counties across Texas have been working to increase voter accessibility at the local level? And Clerk Hollins, this is a good place for you to tell us what's been happening down there.
Absolutely. I believe and I hope that another county or jurisdiction raises their hand to compete with us on this. But I believe that Harris County has done more in 2020 for voter access than any voting jurisdiction in the country. We've provided more ways to vote, more avenues to have your voice heard at the polls, and to do so safely and conveniently and with the peace of mind that your vote's going to be counted than anyone else. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. One, we're offering drive-through voting. Folks can come and cast their ballots without ever getting out of their vehicles, regardless of whether or not you have a disability. You have the opportunity in Harris County to vote drive-through. Extended hours. We are going to have hours on multiple days in October during the early voting period, where the polls stay open until 10 p.m. to allow for people who have work obligations and family obligations to have a fair shot to have their voice heard. And on one evening, we're going to stay open for 24 hours so that everybody, regardless of your situation, has this one opportunity to cast their votes. And we're the first jurisdiction in the country ever to do that.
Well, that's amazing. The 24-hour aspect, I think, of our lives. What a novel idea. And drive-through with voting. I mean, let's get some more of that. That's incredible.
Absolutely. We're going to have a record number of voting locations. From 2016 till now, in the early voting period, we're tripling the number of locations where you can cast your votes in Harris County. And of course, for the first presidential election in Harris County history, you can vote on election day from any one of our voting centers. And we're going to have over 800 of them. And again, these are drastic increases from the past. Extending the period for early voting. Of course, that's true for all Texans. We're going to have 3 weeks. But we got there by Harris County sending a letter to Governor Abbott and requesting it. And we're glad that he responded as he did in that regard. But then voting by mail. What we're attempting to do right now is send a vote by mail application along with educational materials about who qualifies to vote by mail and who doesn't to every single voter in Harris County. Because we all know that not everybody has access to the internet. Not everybody is up to date on information. Not everybody gets the newspaper dropped on their door every morning. And so what better way to educate people on their rights, to help them to understand and decide for themselves if they are eligible to vote by mail, than by actually sharing the rules with them and then providing them with an application so that if they make that decision, they can conveniently apply on the spot. That is something that is also, first in Texas. We did this in June. We mailed to all of our seniors across Harris County, and we were happy that other counties followed suit. But now we're making the first attempt to send it to every single registered voter in Harris County. Voting by mail is the safest and the most convenient way to cast your vote, especially now as we're enduring the second wave, we may be even to the third wave now of COVID-19 throughout Texas and the South. But also something that some of us don't remember, which is before COVID was a thing, we were all concerned that this was the first year with no straight ticket voting. Lines are going to be longer across this state. And so to be able to vote from your kitchen table, to be able to vote from your sofa and place that in the mail, or come and drop it off at any one of our county clerk's offices, another first in the history of Texas, makes voting by mail safer and convenient for all, but of course those who are eligible, because Texas is one of the 7 states, I believe, that does not have universal vote by mail during the time of COVID-19.
Yeah, all those things you mentioned, I think, really speak to the, the ability to take the time you need. I know when I go vote in person, I'm always feeling, whether there's a line or not, a little bit of pressure to keep it moving, right? And so if you're at home and you're able to sit down and do your research and go through it at your pace, that's going to be a huge advantage to the democratic process. So Royce, a question for you. So we're consistently seeing a lack of presidential engagement in youth communities across the country. Tufts did a poll before Super Tuesday and found out that 66% of millennial and Gen Z Texans had not heard from a presidential campaign. And just last month, the Alliance for Youth Action released a report that found that 40% of young voters in battleground states had not been contacted by the Biden campaign. How are Texas candidates connecting with young Black voters?
In terms of outreach to young Black voters in particular, and young people in general, campaigns talk to people they believe will vote, right? They look at voting history. They go and talk to those folks first and often. Young people may not have any voting history, right? If it is your first eligible election cycle, you don't have that history of participating in elections that will tell the campaign experts to go talk to you, right? It is not reasonable, and it's sort of not what people think happens, right? But like there is a reason why campaigns spend so much energy and so many resources talking to so-called swing voters, right? These are people who are going to go vote and who people believe can be persuaded, right? And it leaves so many people out of the conversation. To Clerk Holland's earlier point about power, do we feel as though we lack power because we don't vote, or do we not vote because we feel we lack power? Right? It is a
circular,
real chicken and egg type of thing. But one thing we can do is decide to vote.
Well, kind of related to that, although campaigns don't traditionally engage youth populations for the reasons you mentioned, we've seen a surge in youth voter turnout in the last couple of years. In 2018, for the first time, voters under the age of 30 voted at a higher rate than voters over the age 65. And we also saw a 300% voter turnout increase in counties like Bexar County and Hays County and Harris County. Saw record numbers of voter registration numbers. Will Black voters turn out this election? And if so, why? And how are organizations like MOVE engaging young communities of color? Raven, can you tell us a little bit about what's being done to engage this population?
Yeah, I think, will young Black voters turn out? I think the easy answer is yes. I think what we have seen through the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement is that we saw an increase in voter turnout in the July runoff here in Texas. We saw an uptick in voter registration. With COVID happening, we saw there was a steep decline in voter registration. And then after the murder of George Floyd, we saw that increase. And so I think, this is a time where young people are looking for action. Young Black voters are looking for something to do, and they see voting as a direct correlation to finding a solution as we talk about criminal justice reform and policing. And so I think that we will see an uptick in youth voter turnout in general, but especially in Black communities. And so I think, we're really excited about that work, and we're trying to tap in to communities. And, prior to COVID, when we were out in the field, all of the cities that we work in are primarily Black and Brown communities. And so we're at, Texas Southern University every day, and the University of Texas at San Antonio, which is a Hispanic serving institution, and we're in those communities. We empower young people to show up in their communities every day and engage other young people. But during COVID, we've just had to, we haven't stopped the work that we've been doing. We just have to get more innovative in the way that we've done it. And so prior to the voter registration deadline, we are working to register. We have sent a voter registration application to over 400,000 young people under the age of 30 here in Texas. And we are also committing to calling every single one of those voters. Potential voters. And so we are working with volunteers and young people and organizations like MOVE across the state to ensure that we can reach those people. And then after the voter registration day, we'll work to turn them out. And so we're really excited about this new program. And, I think that COVID has presented some hurdles, but we know that there are solutions to them. And so we're just trying to work through those new ideas.
That's so good to hear, Raven. And, as a professor, I have to always bring it back to like, how much do we actually know? So the fact that Netflix has 13th, the documentary available to watch on YouTube, you can really understand there's a history of suppression and just trying to keep people from getting to the polls. So I think what you're doing is really commendable because you're really taking it directly to the youth and being where they're at. And of course, just the peer impact, right? Having somebody your age telling you should do this is way more effective than somebody on TV telling you to do something, right? So as we kind of sign off, as a last part of this, question I have for you all is, what is one thing you want young Black voters to walk away with after watching this panel? And I'll take the moderator sort of piece and just sort of talk about the importance of history, right? Understanding that there's been a history of voter suppression in this country that is not recent. It's something that's been around for a long period of time. So knowing your history and knowing that these are longstanding efforts, things like poll taxes, and they all come to the present day where we have maybe more subtle approaches, but nevertheless approaches that keep people away from having access to the vote. So just in knowing the importance of your historical pieces and really making sure you're, I guess, honoring the fact that folks fought really hard for this opportunity for everybody to vote, to make sure you exercise that opportunity. So that's my point. Raven, do you want to be the one to start and give us your last thing for young Black voters to know?
Yeah, I think, in addition to what you were saying is not only should we vote because our ancestors died for our right to vote, but we should also vote because we have the ability to really enact transformative power and change. And so, as Dr. Reddick mentioned, if our vote didn't matter, if it wasn't important, they wouldn't be trying so hard to disenfranchise us. And voting in Texas is hard, but it's not impossible. And so there may be a few extra steps, but you can still get registered and you can still turn out to vote. And, there will be people, whether it's Royce or Clark Collins or MOVE, helping you along the way. But this is really the time now to get engaged because, we could change, the course of history.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you said about the fact there's a community of folks willing to help. Some of them are on this call, and certainly they're accessible in other ways. Royce, what are your thoughts about one last thing for young Black voters to know before we end?
I hope that young Black voters who have watched this come away with an understanding and appreciation of their own power.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Clark Collins, you've been bringing us all kinds of knowledge about what you're doing in Harris County. So for the folks in Harris County and beyond, what is your piece of advice or information you want young Black voters to know?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that historical piece is important. That our ancestors, bled and died, not only for us to be free, but for us to begin to approach equality in this country. And that's still a fight that continues today, and a fight that it's now our responsibility to carry forward. And it can't just be the Ravens and the Royces. It has to be every single one of us who are marching down this path. And many of us have physically marched in the streets this year, and that's really important. But we have to march to the polls as well. And we have to vote like our lives depend on it, because they do. If you're a young Black man in particular, the leadership in your city, in your state, in this country can determine if it's okay for someone who is supposed to protect and serve you to gun you down in your neighborhood, period. And you can change that. But we also have to vote as if our parents' lives and our grandparents' lives depend on it. Because right now, if the United States response to COVID-19 had been average, not stellar, not world-class, had been average, then 150,000 of our parents and grandparents would still be with us today. And by the end of it, I was just reading reports today, it's looking like another 200,000 people are going to die by the end of this year. And that's all based on leadership and the lack thereof in this country and in this state. And so vote like your lives depend on it. Vote like your family's lives depend on it. Vote as if your interests are truly at stake, because they are.
You really just summarized it in a sort of heartfelt and meaningful way about sort of why this is important. It's not an issue, it's esoteric, it's actually about life. And, you know, I know I was going to make one comment, but another comment, and that is just the intersectionality of what you care about. So I'm an educator. Some folks care about transportation. Some folks care about housing policies or the finance areas. All those issues really come down to judiciary. You know, what policies, who judges if you have to get caught up in the legal system, right? Those things all matter. And I think it's really important. Everything you just said, Clerk Collins, is about the life and death issues we're talking about, and liberty, right? It's not just those things, right? So anyway, this has been amazing. I thank you all so much for such great insights. This has been educational for me, and I'm sure everybody who's watching this will also walk away with some incredible insights. So thank you all for being part of this. Remember, there's so much access and help for you if you're interested in voting. So please, social media, websites, check them all out. Take advantage of these resources, and we hope to see you at the polls. Thanks so much.
Thank you.